Going digital. We've said it time and time again. Going online today is crucial. It's super important for all businesses, no matter what it is that you do. But in the midst of this pandemic and this new normal, who are the top websites dominating the net? How are they doing it? We're going to dig into that. We're going to dig into some successful stories and, most importantly, some tips of advice. We have a stellar guest with us today, Selina Bieber. She is the Senior Regional Director for Turkey, the MENA region, and South Africa at GoDaddy. Selina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Selina, tell us a little bit. With the new normal, with the pandemic, how has the online sphere changed?
I think, this year has made digital prominent in everybody's, it's been on the tip of our tongue. What we know is always we've had people, especially the smaller size businesses, we've had them say, I do want to get online, I do want to go digital, but it's always been something that they can do in the future. This year, it's been a year where people are at home, they're online, they're more connected. And so people have been forced, whether it's a business, whether it's an individual, from a consumer point of view, people have been forced to change their habits a little bit. If they weren't online before, they were forced to look at, okay, so how do I order X item online? I've got friends in my circle. I'm someone that is an avid online shopper, but they didn't used to order online before. When you think about supermarket shopping, they then started to order online. So this is a trickle-on effect. And then businesses had to think about, how can I make it more convenient for my customers to come and shop with me, to browse my products, to utilize my services. So it was a shift in the way we think about doing business and communicating with our potential customers, and it, consumer-led, but because there was the kind of shutdown and lockdown, people also had to come up with innovative ways. Businesses had to come up with innovative ways to help people, for example, try on clothes. At one point, trying on clothes wasn't an option, so we had one customer who allowed a virtual kind of wardrobe, a virtual dressing room, so people could try on the clothes virtually and then inform themselves as to whether they want to purchase them or not. So that's the kind of push we saw, especially in that smaller segment. It was a must. It became a must versus something that they wanted to do at a later date.
Right. Now, what kind of consumer behavior are we seeing changing? Are people navigating in a different way? Are people buying in a different way? You were just talking about how people try on clothes, right? So in terms of consumer behavior and how we measure that, what has changed?
Let me first start with, I've prepared a couple of slides. So let me talk through, I'm not able to share my screen. So I'm going to talk through some data points and, look at where we were at and then how we've come to where we are today. So when we look at, let's talk about the MENA region. When we look at the MENA region, we've got top 3 markets. We've got the UAE, obviously, which is almost 100%, 99% of the population, 99% internet penetration. Egypt is around 50%, and Saudi is close to 90%. So this is, we're already talking about relatively connected populations, but the way we have always spent time, it's been up to 7 hours online per day and mobile driven. I think what we've seen during this, and the Middle East has always been ahead of the global norm. So over the past couple of years, we've seen that kind of growth trend go higher than the global norm, and this year it's kind of expanded as well. And so when we consider that 7 hours per day on average are spent online in these markets, in these specific markets, what this pandemic, and let's call it this new normal, has really done is increase the level of socialization, communication online. So we know, social media is massively used throughout this region as well. Again, UAE leads the way, but Saudi has one of the highest rates of YouTube viewage across the region. Right. But when we look at the pandemic specifically, we see that the average time spent online in the 16 to 34-year-old segment, the age group, increased by 43% globally. And this was this was on average for all age groups, between the 16 to 34-year-old segment, it increased by 51%. So over 50% of the time that was normally on average, so we're talking, 3 hours, let's say for the MENA region, 3 hours was spent online before the pandemic. During the pandemic, that increased by over 50%. So, how do we communicate if we can't come together as a family? I've got parents in Australia, so the way I communicate with them has always been online, but you get to points where, okay, so we were going to travel, but now we can't travel. So how can I look for a present for my dad, for example, for his birthday this year as his 80th birthday, and I wasn't able to go and see him. So this is the way we've had to rethink how we function as consumers. But together with that, we've seen a greater usage and development of websites, online tools, and apps. So for example, education, we never really thought about it as online. You would go to the classroom, you'd send your child to school, and it would be primarily a face-to-face learning environment. But this year we saw and had to test how remote education works. And honestly, I've got a 3-year-old. It's the first time I've ever looked at, okay, so how do I encourage learning without saturating the time in front of a screen? And there are very, very quality apps out there for, toddlers, and exponential growth in the number that are available in this short period of time. Obviously, e-commerce is another one. We saw, 47% of respondents saying that they're more likely to shop online, and they will continue to do so. So it kind of looked at, the needs that we have as individuals, and again, as consumers, these shifted during this initial phase of the pandemic, and some of those behaviors have continued. So for example, online streaming, video streaming, video watching, content sharing, gaming, they also increase. But even if we look at things like the instance of booking appointments online, whether it's a doctor's appointment, online screening to see, now it's common practice before going to, for example, a physio appointment or an osteopath appointment, to be asked, have you had any symptoms in the past few days? And so you can book these online, and then there's a new process to how you actually get that treatment. You can even, in some markets, you can even order prescriptions online. As long as you have the ID and you have the digital copy of the prescription, they're able to bring it now to the front door. So there's been an evolution and a kind of rapid shift that we probably wouldn't have seen. It would have happened over time, but not as condensed in terms of time frame, that was just forced through this situation that the entire world found itself in.
Right. Very interesting insights indeed. Now, what's the first step that you would advise an entrepreneur or a young startup, even if they're not at the market launch phase yet, but what's the first step that they should take to ensure an online presence?
So I think, what we have to do is unpack what an online presence is.
Right.
When we talk about an online presence, somebody could say, well, I've got a WhatsApp account, I've got a WhatsApp number, so I'm online already. Somebody can say, I've got a Facebook page, so I'm online already. This is a start. I mean, yes, all of these qualify as an online presence, but do you own it? Do you have an online presence where you can be found online? And so our general suggestion is look at getting a domain name, and that's the equivalent. When we look at a physical space versus a virtual space, it's the same kind of logic. If you want a physical shop front, you need to get your address. You need to get your shop. And so your domain name is your address there. And then you start building a website on top of that and interconnecting it and integrating it. You decorate it the way you want. Maybe you have 3 pages, which could be the equivalent of 3 rooms in a shop, for example, or 3 different display areas in a shop, in a physical shop. But generally starting with a domain name, so you have that space. You don't have to immediately build something tomorrow, but the benefit is you start, that you own it, people can find you, and then you start looking at how you want to build your brand, whether it's a personal brand, whether it's a business brand, whether it's an idea. It's yours to then take forward and build on and grow. Right.
And this leads us a little bit to e-commerce, right? When we want to sell, e-commerce becomes a must, building that kind of e-commerce website. And I guess my question is, Since e-commerce can sound like a daunting task, it can sound a little bit scary for entrepreneurs as they are starting, right? What would you say are the key factors that make an e-store stand out? I know that this year GoDaddy has taken huge steps launching the website builder and the e-store. So what would you say are those kind of key factors?
Yeah, I think, even before thinking about e-commerce, we should think about because an e-commerce site is also a website. So there are some core elements of a website that we need to consider. Design is one. I mean, if you have a brand design, you have we call it brand identity for a reason. So if you have certain colors that you use, make sure to carry those over to the website design so that people can recognize you immediately. Understanding how content stands out. You don't want to overload a website, regardless of whether it's e-commerce. You don't want to overload it with content. You want to make sure that, number one, people can come to your homepage and fulfill or get the information that they're asking for, especially if they're coming in from a search engine, for example. If they've asked a question, they want to find the answer. And that will also feed back into search engine optimization, which I'll touch upon in a second. But one of the core things to have on your homepage is what we call a call to action. So a call to action is usually a button or something that you want a website visitor to fulfill. And this is the same for, a standard website. For example, it might be book an appointment, it might be sign up to a newsletter. But when we look at e-commerce, this becomes even more important because you have the prime real estate above the fold on your website. So when somebody hits your site, the first thing they see, and depending on your digital marketing strategy, it could be a specific product page or it could be the home page. But is there a sale, for example? So we've got White Friday coming up. Do you have any promotions for White Friday? So what you'll want to do is you'll want to have your promotion on the marquee image. So that's the first image or the header image on your homepage. And then you might say like buy now or, view now, and then have them click through. So if you've got a special set of products that are part of that sale, then you can take them immediately to that page. And it's really about knowing what you want as a business to what you want to put in front of your visitors on your site. So that call to action is super, super important. But let's go back to the SEO point. I mean, search engine optimization can be quite a difficult, honestly, it's a technical and it can be daunting for some people as well.
Yeah.
If you're starting out, there are tools. Our website builder, for example, we do have an easy SEO tool, so it's not as difficult to get going. But I always say with SEO, that gone are the days of basically polluting your website with keywords. It's really about what is relevant for your business and for your customer. When somebody searches for your website, do some research. What are they going to search for? What is your core product or service area, and what are the keywords and the volumes related to those? So if there is, if you've got one keyword and there are 3 different ways of talking about it, for example, design, it's a very, very broad keyword. So how would you take design and talk about it specifically? Is it, architectural design? Is it visual design? Is it information design? And then look at the keyword volumes associated with that and utilize that and build on it as you build your website content, because that will also help you in search rankings. Let's take an example. If you're an e-commerce store and you're selling shoes, but you're selling, let's say, Roman sandals or Greek sandals. You have that in your website, but say you only have one Greek sandal and the rest are different. Well, then let's say that there's only one that's leather and the rest are synthetic. But you say that you have leather Greek sandals, for example. It's a very basic example, but if somebody is searching specifically for that product and they come through the search engine, they click on your website and they can't find it, they're going to drop, they're going to bounce. And that will tell the search engine that your website and your website content is mismatched versus potentially a website that does have that. So the time spent on your page, on your website, is going to help you in the search rankings because you've done your research and you know that you're truly matching the visitor query with what you offer on the website. Right. So if you can do that match, then you'll get higher rankings in search. So there's that optimization portion to think of. But if we go back to e-commerce in general, having Google Analytics linked to your site is crucial, because you do need to understand what the customer journey is. And I think for e-commerce especially, one of the most important things is how do you build your customer journey? So we've talked about the website design, having the call to action, but is it easy for someone to come to your website and find products? Do you have different categories of products? So you want to segment them so somebody who comes in can find, for example, accessories, t-shirts, dresses, I'm just making it up, but is it easy for you to help the customer link to what they're looking for when they come to your website? And then let's also talk about discoverability. Are you on business listings? Do you have social media properties that you're leveraging to send traffic to your site? So another great example that I have is a couple of years ago, I was doing research for, just Christmas shopping, New Year shopping, and I found a really nice wooden toy on a Instagram page that I was following, and I wanted to order it for my son, but I couldn't remember the name of the brand that sold it. It was late one night, and so I was looking on Google. I couldn't find it because it was such a niche product. Right. Anything I searched for didn't get me to that product, and so I ended up writing to the Instagram account and saying what was the name of that brand, and then I was able to go to their website. They had 3 different kinds of this special product. I was able to get all the information I needed online. It was easy for me to find it on their website. And then the sales process was very simple. You just click what you want, you fill in your details. And the benefit thereafter was you obviously create your account, but then they had ongoing communication. So the other portion is you build the customer journey, but once the purchase is completed, then how do you continue to communicate with your customer on where their purchase is? Do you have email marketing in place? Do you have, or WhatsApp, for example, to follow up on that order? And there you have the end-to-end customer journey. So you may start from social media, they hit your site, your website experience is important to be able to close the sale. Is the customer able to find what they're looking for in, 3 clicks instead of 7 clicks? Because that's also going to increase your sales potential. And then after they make the payment and check out, what is your post-purchase process? Do you continue to communicate with the customer? Or for example, if you haven't made a sale off the back of that visit, do you then communicate with the person that, maybe signed up but didn't purchase anything, or did they leave something in their cart and they didn't purchase it? Then you can send them an email and say, hey, you forgot this in your cart. Here's the 10% promotion code for you on your purchase. So these are the small tweaks, but it's very much about creating the right journey. So you really maximize on the potential sales opportunity across the entire website and your e-commerce site.
Right. I love this. It's super interesting because we entrepreneurs tend to think of a website as sort of my front page where people need to know who I am, right? And you're kind of changing perceptions on this, right? You said very, very key points. Having the promotions right at the front, the first thing people should see, connecting with SEO, and keeping that relationship after the purchase. I think that was fundamental, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
Now, when we look at the websites that have been leading throughout this pandemic, throughout this sort of new normal that we are living, what are the common things that you find? What are the points that you're seeing in common? And what do you think are the updates that they consistently need to make to keep, to stay on top?
So it depends. It's very dependent on the kind of business. For example, let's talk about a few different industries. The pandemic changed the way some people had to operate. So, for example, we've got one customer, and she is a nutritionist. She does consults for people who want to lose weight, gain weight, basically on the entire diet. But because of the pandemic, there's a limitation on how much face-to-face contact she can have. So she's now introduced a book now, book online option. So she has shifted from a face-to-face transaction in her clinic, and what she brings in is you can purchase the package online. So it's a virtual consultation. You can choose from the different service packages, and it's four consultations in one package that you purchase, but then it links to Zoom. And so she comes and she has a consultation with you on Zoom, follows up over WhatsApp. And this is how we've seen her shift. And when we talk about the call to action, that call to action is book now, is book the appointment online. So that's very specific to her industry, but we have seen this with quite a few, different, like doctors, for example, physiotherapists. This is how we've seen that industry kind of shift a little bit. If we look at, again, a little bit related, Pilates teachers or personal fitness instructors, they've taken that online focus too. So rather than having the face-to-face, they've said, okay, I'm going to do a group session on Zoom. And so you can go to their website, you can look up their packages, you can look at the times that they have the classes, and then everybody is virtually doing their workout on Zoom. But then, let's think about some of the other businesses, like hairdresser salons or beauty salons that were closed for a certain period of time. These kind of industries, they shifted to home care packages. So what the beauty of an online presence is, it's not a shop front that, costs a lot of money to renovate overnight. What you can do is you can change the merchandise on the site extremely quickly. So if you have a, come and visit us message as a call to action today, tomorrow you can update that button to say, call me for an appointment. And so shifting that merchandise, we talked about having the promotions there. What we saw was a shift from come in and get a massage or come in and get a hair treatment to here's your home care package that includes XYZ, and this is the amount that you have to pay. So that was another shift in terms of how businesses were, let's say, best practice in terms of pivoting towards the needs of the time. But in general, it really comes down to knowing your customer and knowing your audience, and then feeding that into the website design. If you don't do your existing customer research effectively, then you may always fall short of understanding and then showcasing the right service or the right product or the right language with your potential customers. Going and communicating with them, having, conversations. How are you doing? We did see quite a few businesses not only putting forward, this is how we're adapting to the COVID pandemic, this is the precautions we're taking, and that constant communications was also reassuring for a lot of the consumers. But at the same time, asking questions, for example, on social media, how are you coping? What are you doing? What are your needs? And that is valuable feedback as well, to then adapt your tools, your services and products to meeting the consumer needs. And each and every one of those, contact number, open channel of communications, the call to action, and really meeting those needs. I think they are the four key things of having a effective website at any time, but in particular during the pandemic as well, because again, you're speaking to the visitor that comes to your site within the context that they're currently experiencing. So you're adapting to their needs.
Right. I think this is key, right? This idea of engaging in a conversation. It's not a one-way communication, right? But you engage in a relationship with the customer. I think that's brilliant. So we have a few questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask, before we move there, what is your advice for entrepreneurs who are moving from offline to online? What is your golden tip?
Take the plunge. I think that's, my overarching note. It can be a challenge, but there are ways to, if you know your business, it's always going to be a learning process. But once you take that initial step, it's going to get easier from there. Taking the first step is going to be the biggest challenge. But once you're online, we just talked about engagement. Build a one-page website. and then start to understand how people use it. Share it with your friends and family, get them to offer you feedback, and then build more. You know, you don't have to do everything at once. Just take the first step, and then slowly and gradually, as you get more confident, as you see more benefits, or as you talk to more people, then add a page or add a section. Just go with what you have right now, and you'll start to see the benefits, and really it will take off thereafter.
Right, right. So let me move on to the questions from our viewers. Mohammed Khulif is saying, some people still miss the physical experience. How can we improve the customer experience to add more value than the one found in physical experience? How to bridge the psychological gap? What about AR and VR and their changes to bridge this gap? A very really intense, very complex question.
It's a very
indeed.
intense question. So I'm going to split it a little bit. I really do think it depends on the industry. If we go back to the, you know, the focus on personal trainers and that kind of thing, it's an industry, and it's face to face. So we've got the technologies, the video calling technologies, which at least eliminate that that gap to a certain extent. But look at the tone with which you write content on your site. Look at the posts that you have on social media. You know, even from a business point of view, when you look at, if you communicate with customers on WhatsApp, do you have a very formal tone, or are you a little bit softer? Do you communicate them only when they send you a message or have a question, or do you have more proactive communications? I think these are the things where you can think of not just the tone and the way you present your brand, but when you want to create that more physical connection, look at how you engage and really understand when you test something. You know, if you test a proactive message and you get a positive response from your audience, then you can continue to do so. And I think that does help minimize that need to be in a physical space. So that would be my answer to the first question. You know, AI, when we look at entrepreneurs, when we look at small businesses, sometimes it's a very, you know, far off concept. Yeah. So I think it's probably out of reach. I'm going to, you know, this is my opinion, but I think it's probably out of reach as a solution for many of the small businesses or entrepreneurs that are starting up, especially if they're not tech savvy. So don't overwhelm yourself or your customers, because it could also be very technical for your customers.
Right.
But in the example, you know, as I said, the kind of virtual dressing room, that's a good application of kind of smart technology that makes lives easier. And as long as the customer or consumer doesn't have to really, you know, deal with a technical part of it, if it's just enhancing their experience with your brand or business and closing the gap, you know, closing that physical gap, I think that's where the benefit is, and it may be easier to integrate and add more value to your business. So look at where it adds value and helps to close the gap, and that's where I think the opportunity is.
Right, right. Selina, you mentioned driving through social media, all channels towards the website, right? What would you advise are other ways to drive people to that website?
Again, it comes down to the business. I mean, if you are really active in PR, for example, in the media, that's another good way to build awareness. You know, when we look at the marketing funnel, it really depends where you want to play. So obviously, you know, big corporate brands, we see them on TV and they build awareness. But for you yourself, even in your local environment, are there any, you know, community events, community newsletters? Are there any forums that you may want to be building your brand awareness around? You know, maybe there's a really good network, or let's say, you know, you are doing, let's say you're cooking cupcakes or doing catering, for example. Social media is a great way to get discovered, because you are you're a brand, potentially, or a business that's quite visual. So Instagram, for example, is there a good one to have. But word of mouth is also going to be important. So do you have people that you've worked with before who can then generate word of mouth for you? Do you have any potential influencer friends or anyone, you know, maybe you can strike up a deal with an influencer and cater for one of their events. And that will also help you drive traffic. So, looking at the traditional but also digital marketing routes to build the word of mouth, because, again, if we look at top of funnel marketing, it's about how many people know about you, and then you can drive them down and look at Facebook, social media, Twitter, Instagram, but understand what suits your business the most. A visual brand may be better on Instagram and Facebook versus on Twitter, for example. One of the businesses that I'm currently consulting for, they're very much on Instagram, but also LinkedIn, because there's a designer community that they are connecting with on LinkedIn, and it's kind of a little bit tied to academia. So that's where they also get word of mouth. And through their projects that they've generated, they've gotten a lot of PR, and from competitors that are talking in a B2B industry, that's where they're getting referrals. So say X brand has worked with you before, then they say to Y brand, hey, these are good, or Y brand hears that you've already worked with X brand, and so that's where they then come to you, because they know they've seen the project that you've done for X brand. So I think this is, building that word of mouth is key, but understanding where the best opportunity for word of mouth is going to be will then really help you drive traffic to your website as the kind of fulfillment mechanism.
Right. Well, we ran out of time for the questions, but Selina, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your tips of advice, for your examples. It has been an incredibly enriching conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Have a good day.